I have a comfortable and fulfilling life. I have a job I truly enjoy. I live in a nice suburb and am blessed with three wonderful children, ages 8, 6, and 4, and a lovely wife, Emily. I've always felt Emily and I were an ideal match. However, a recent email I received has deeply unsettled me and planted a seed of doubt in my mind. Emily lived in the UK between 2010 and 2015, during which time she pursued a PhD. Because she lived there so long, she developed many close friendships and has made it a point to return every couple of years to maintain those ties. This past August, she traveled to the UK for 3 weeks to attend the wedding of one of her close friends. After some consideration, we agreed that it would be best for me and the children to remain at home, as I could not take that much time away from work, and the children were unlikely to find much enjoyment in such an event. Emily departed, returned as expected, and life returned to normal for us. Last week, I received an email on my work email address. It was supposedly from the wife of Emily's friend. I'll call him Jake. According to this woman, she has a very strong reason to suspect that Jake and Emily engaged in an affair. She listed off her suspicions, noting Jake had picked Emily up from the airport, spent considerable time at her hotel, and how the two of them frequently went out to dinner alone. She even included pictures of my wife's earrings that she said she found in Jake's pockets when she was doing the laundry, and pictures of a lipstick stain on his shirt. The color is one I recognize as something Emily often wears. There is some other evidence she listed off. For the sake of conciseness, I will not include them here. All this was a lot to absorb, and for a while, I thought it was some sort of joke, so I tried my best to ignore it, but it kept coming back into my mind. I remember that before her trip, my wife would talk to all her friends there. I don't know if this email is influencing my memory, but I think she probably spoke with Jake the most. Additionally, I know Emily never liked Jake's wife, though I can't say why. I've never pried into Emily's phone or social media accounts before, but I feel very tempted to now. However, I know I'd feel terrible if I looked and found nothing. Also, if I start acting suspicious, wouldn't she just delete everything out of fear of being found out? I am unsure of how to move forward and would welcome any guidance on handling this. The best I can currently come up with is asking to see her phone immediately after confronting her about it so as to not give her time to delete anything, though part of me thinks this would upset her and potentially not even show anything. Would I be the jerk for telling my wife to show me her phone after I got an email accusing her of cheating? I forgot to include, my wife no longer has these earrings. She wasn't wearing them when she returned, and when I asked, she said she lost them. Now for the first update. A few hours after sharing my first post, I confronted Emily. She confirmed my fears. She claims she's in love with Jake and can't live a lie any longer. She still claims to love me and the kids, but says she can't stay with us any longer. According to her, she was waiting for a better time to tell me and the children. Apparently, this has been going on since March, with Jake flying out here occasionally and Emily secretly meeting him. We're getting divorced. Emily is moving to the UK soon. She confirmed that in August, in addition to the wedding, she attended a job interview and she's set to start around the new year. She's already applied for a British visa. She plans to live with Jake once she moves. As for custody, Emily is voluntarily surrendering her chance of full custody. She doesn't want to uproot the kids, so they'll stay here in Canada with me. There's a part of me that appreciates that decision, but there's also the part that is astonished at how easily she's walking away. She wants to pay child support, but I'd rather raise my children without her financial influence. That said, the court will likely insist on support, regardless of my feelings. Emily is also seeking structured visitation rights, which, given the circumstances, will likely be granted. Based on what I've been told, the court generally leans toward arrangements that allow both parents to maintain relationships with the children, even when one is relocating to a different country. The lawyers are still working out the details, but it seems she'll have visitation during school breaks and holidays, with the possibility of virtual calls in between. I've been keeping things as amicable as possible, and the more cooperative I am, the more Emily seems to agree with my demands. We are also discussing the future of our home. Emily has expressed a desire to sell the property and divide the proceeds. While I am reluctant to part with the family home, it is unlikely I have much of a choice since it was bought during our marriage. For now, our lawyers are still working through the details, and no final decisions have been made. Given the situation, it could be a good while before we reach a resolution. In the meantime, I've been advised not to make any major financial moves. As much as I want to stay here with the children, I know selling is most likely inevitable. As of this writing, Emily is in an Airbnb, and Jake has flown here to stay with her. They plan on traveling to the UK at some point in the near future. My lawyer tells me that adultery isn't grounds for special treatment when it comes to custody or property division. Therefore, it won't influence how assets are divided unless marital funds are directly involved. Emily likely used money from her personal account. Unless it can be proven she used our joint finances to fund the affair, it's unlikely this will make any difference in court. I have been in regular communication with Jake's soon-to-be ex-wife, Eleanor, primarily through email, and more recently, we've spoken over the phone a few times. Eleanor apologized, saying she felt guilty for telling me about the affair and worried that if she hadn't, maybe my marriage could have been salvaged. I reassured her that for me, the gravity of the situation made divorce inevitable, and I'd rather not remain in the dark about something of this significance. She even sent me messages and other evidence of their relationship, but since Emily is openly admitting to the affair, it doesn't really matter in the context of the law. Eleanor has also told me a lot about Jake. Apparently, this is the third time he's cheated on her, and she's had enough. There's no chance of reconciliation this time, she says, and he doesn't seem interested in trying. She mentioned that Jake has zero desire to raise children who are not biologically his, which explains why Emily's not fighting for custody. Eleanor's divorce will most likely be much longer and more drawn out than mine, given that both her and Jake want full custody of their children and can't agree on several other issues. I haven't had much time to process everything. These past 2 weeks have felt like a blur in every way. But one thing I can say with certainty is that I have nothing left for Emily. Not because she betrayed our marriage, but because of how easily she's walking away from our children. I never thought I could hate someone I once loved so much. It's a strange feeling. The hardest part in all of this is the children. My 2 youngest daughters have started asking why their mother isn't around as much anymore, and it's been very difficult trying to communicate with them about the nature of the situation. My eldest seems to understand a little more, and as a result, he has become quiet and withdrawn. I'm fortunate to have a family that has been incredibly supportive so far. My children have received numerous thoughtful letters from some of their cousins, which I've been reading to them each night. All my siblings have also sent gifts for the kids, and one of my brothers, along with his wife, drove up to visit over the past weekend. My sister-in-law even prepared plenty of food, some of which is still in the freezer. They also kept the children entertained while I met with my lawyer. My other siblings have also offered to come by and look after the kids whenever I need them. Beyond that, my parents have been calling daily to check in on us, and my 78-year-old mother has already made plans to stay with us for 2 weeks in November to help around the house. The collective effort of my family has made this experience much more bearable, and I'm deeply grateful for all their support. To everyone who encouraged me to speak with Emily after my last post, I'm grateful. I was tempted to ignore Eleanor's message, but it kept gnawing at me. Your advice gave me the courage to act. Emily has shown herself to be a liar, and I have no doubt that her idea of a better time was simply when it would cause the least inconvenience for her and Jake. Think of this less as an update and more as a chance to vent a few things now that I've had more time to process my situation. I know that Emily often traveled back and forth to the UK during our marriage. She claims her affair with Jake only began in March 2024, but I'm convinced she's lying. It's almost certain that this has been going on for years. Given how much she had already prepared by the time I confronted her, it's become clear to me and everyone else that she had been planning this for some time. In fact, within a few short days of our confrontation, she already had certain legal documents prepared. Additionally, Jake arriving in Canada shortly after I confronted Emily made it clear that they had planned for her to tell me roughly around this date in advance. It makes sense that Emily was well prepared and was just waiting for things to be better lined up for herself. After all, she'd long since applied for her visa, secured a job, secretly appraised her car, our family car, though it was under her name, and sent personal items with Jake to the UK during his secret visits, all right under my oblivious nose. I have a feeling I'm only scratching the surface and have no real idea of how far this actually goes. Not that Emily would ever tell me its depth. In addition to all of this, Emily had already been in touch with her lawyer long before I confronted her. Taking all this into account, it's hard not to wonder if she secured her job even earlier than she let on, perhaps to make her actions seem less calculated. 2 of Emily's friends have since reached out to express shock and disappointment by her actions. One of them, Janet, mentioned that according to another friend, Emily had been consulting her divorce lawyer as far back as late August or early September, and this other friend also confirmed my suspicion that Emily had been sending some of her belongings to the UK during Jake's visits. I've been losing sleep, replaying the past few months in my mind, maybe driving myself a little crazy, but certain things stand out. For example, when Emily went to the UK in August for the wedding, she was carrying 3 fully loaded suitcases. She told me that they were filled with presents for her friends, and I didn't question it. even though it seemed a bit excessive at the time. When I picked her up from the airport after her trip, I noticed the bags were suspiciously light. I can assume that in addition to the job interview she claimed to attend, she transported a bunch of her personal items to the UK, which would explain why, since her return, she seemed to have been wearing a smaller selection of her clothing. Despite this, I was somehow blindsided, and I completely blame myself. Looking back, I can see there were signs I ignored, and I guess I didn't think Emily was capable of this sort of thing. A part of me wonders if this outcome could have been avoided entirely had I been more assertive and vigilant in the past. The worst part of all is that my children are now dealing with the consequences of my ignorance and stupidity. While I twiddled my thumbs, my wife had essentially started a new life. Most people in my life now know about my separation from Emily. I've stopped wearing my wedding band, and I've explained the situation to friends and colleagues who noticed its absence. One of my close friends, and many others who reached out privately on Reddit, have suggested I get DNA tests for the children, given Emily's travel patterns and tendency to lie. While I understand where they are coming from, this is something I'll never do. I'd never assign my children to another man. Nothing will change that. Life without Emily has thus far been difficult. Mornings have become a hectic rush. Between getting the kids ready and getting myself out the door, I'm barely on time for work for nearly half the week. It's frankly exhausting trying to keep up with all the extra parenting duties I have to perform throughout the day. Our current home has a large driveway, so on top of everything else, I'm already dreading the task of shoveling it once the snow starts falling. The kids are feeling the strain as well. They don't particularly like the food I prepare most days, and they hate how I'm always busy. It's incredibly frustrating to know that while we're here struggling, Emily recently departed for a relaxing vacation through Europe with Jake. Communication between us has dwindled, and I only learned of these developments recently. I have no idea if she plans to return to Canada after her vacation or settle directly into what will likely be a very comfortable life in the UK. On a more positive note, I was able to get the kids to see their doctor recently. She gave me a bunch of useful resources and advice. She placed an emphasis on how time and clear communication were the most important factors for their adjustment. While I'm optimistic, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't worried. It's still early, I know, but they remain quite upset about the entire ordeal and act out regularly as a result. It is abundantly clear that they're having a hard time adjusting to our new reality. Throughout all of this, my family has been a tremendous support. My mother arrived as promised early last week, and things have already become significantly easier. The kids enjoy her cooking and spending time with her. Her presence has also freed me to handle other tasks. Whenever the divorce is finalized, I plan to designate my eldest brother and sister-in-law as legal guardians for the children. They live relatively nearby and have already agreed to take on that role if needed, which brings me some peace of mind. However, I highly doubt this will be anytime soon, given my much busier schedule and Emily dragging her feet before traveling. The whole process has slowed to a snail's pace. One of the hardest aspects of all this has been making decisions about our family home. After considerable thought and speaking it over many times with my family, I'm leaning towards selling at this stage. Emily has already offered me a bit more than half of the proceeds since she sold our SUV right before leaving the country. My lawyer has noted that selling the SUV before we finalized anything was premature on her part, considering I contributed significantly 40% to the purchase. He thinks I have strong grounds to seek reimbursement elsewhere in our asset division, which aligns with Emily offering more of the house. Getting more than half seems fair, given that I contributed about 65 to 70% of the down payment and monthly mortgage payments. I'm frustrated because the family SUV was registered only in her name, even though I covered about 40% of its cost. She sold it unilaterally. My sedan is too snug for the kids and inconvenient for my mother to use for errands, so I'll need to trade it for something larger. In return, Emily has graciously insisted I keep the furniture and appliances. It's the least she can do, I suppose. Part of me wants to stay in our current home, but it's probably better for us to move. I hope this will help us avoid future interference from Emily, though she's likely to interfere no matter where we are. I've been looking at townhouses closer to my work, which would cut down my commute and place us near a well-rated school. However, my sisters pointed out that moving the kids now would mean changing schools and losing their friends, which would be another big change for them. An alternative is moving to a smaller, more manageable house close to our current one. This would reduce my workload and allow the kids to stay at the same school. Regardless of which option we choose, the idea of a new home without Emily's memory is appealing. Our current home's location is another example of how short-sighted I've been. It was more convenient for Emily's commute than mine. It worked for a while since the children's school was close to Emily's work, in case they needed her during the day. But now all of this is useless, as my work is rather far. I've heard nothing from Emily's family, and frankly, I have no interest in reaching out. As for Emily's future with Jake, I don't wish her relationship to fail. The longer her life is stable, the less likely she'll disrupt ours. But I take solace in knowing she remains unaware of Jake's infidelity history. I don't feel any moral obligation to warn her about Jake's character, and Eleanor feels the same way. I've made a point to check in on Eleanor regularly. She doesn't have the same family support I do. Her immediate family is charmed by Jake's wealth and believes she should do whatever it takes to keep him, even though it's clear neither he nor Eleanor wants reconciliation. Am I the idiot for refusing to be my niece's chauffeur until her parents show some respect? I, male 29, and my wife, female 30, have 2 kids, male 5, 3M. My wife works a full-time office job, while I work from home with extremely flexible hours. My sister, 26F, let's call her Barb, and her husband, 30M, let's call him Nick, live nearby and work full-time jobs. They have a daughter, 5F, let's call her Tracy. Because of my comfortable work schedule, when our kids started going to daycare, we decided that I'd be dropping off and picking up my niece from daycare alongside my own kids. I didn't mind and thought it was great for my kids to spend time with their cousin. I get along with Tracy and always thought I was her cool uncle. She's a sweet kid and usually well-behaved. Most days, I bring her and my kids back to our house, make them snacks or dinner, and in the evening, my sister comes to pick them up. A few days ago, the 5-year-old kids were watching Bluey on the TV as I was preparing snacks with my 3-year-old, and I suddenly heard yelling. I rushed over to see what was happening, and my son was yelling at her, "My dad's not a girl," while my niece yelled back, "He is. He's a teat. That's like a girl." The word is different in my language, but the meaning holds, as is the distinction between using it versus simply addressing a gay person. I was kind of in shock at first, but I turned off the TV and sat her down, explaining that this is a very bad word and we shouldn't be calling people that, and that regardless, I'm not a girl. I told her she should apologize to me because we don't act mean to each other in this family, and if I hear this again, I'm going to talk to her parents, and she's going to get in trouble. She said she won't get in trouble because that's what her dad called me, and he's not in trouble. I was stunned. I told her that regardless of what her dad said, it's a very bad word, and she's not to use it with me or in my presence, and that she should apologize regardless because it hurt my feelings, which she did because she's a really good kid. We talked some more, and I prodded her about other things her parents said. From what I gathered, getting info out of a 5-year-old being obviously a difficult and unreliable process, Nick, my brother-in-law, told my sister in Tracy's presence that men shouldn't be sitting at home all day and doing childcare, that cooking is a woman's duty, as is cleaning, and really most of the things I do around my house. And that I'm a girl. I interpret this as not really a man, because I do housework, and my wife earns more money than me. I explained to her, the best I could, that men and women could work from an office or from home, and that my wife or Barb working long hours from the office doesn't make them men, and vice versa. But I didn't dwell on it with her, since it's not really her fault. I didn't immediately bring it up with my sister because I figured it would be a difficult conversation, and I didn't want to have it in front of the kids, and I wanted to talk it out with my wife first as well. I did talk to my wife that evening, and she seemed really upset as well. I told her that I think I should demand an apology from Nick and my sister, and she agreed. I called my sister and told her what happened, and she said that it's just a word and I'm blowing it out of proportion, and obviously Nick doesn't dislike me. I said I don't care whether he does or doesn't dislike me. He is talking shoot about me behind my back to my niece and to her, and she is apparently very chill about this, rather than standing up for me. She said that was how Nick was, and I should stop being a drama queen. I told her to frick off, and if that was how she felt, she could pick up her own child from daycare, and hung up. I know it was really short notice and rude, but I really felt like I was being disrespected by people I did so much for over the years, and were my family. My wife said she understood, and that I shouldn't back down until I at least get a proper apology. The next 2 days were a weekend, and there was no daycare. I assumed there would be calls or texts from Barb, but there was nothing. In fact, the suspicious lack of any messages or calls made me think she didn't take my words seriously, and this actually got me even more angry. The calls did come when it was time to pick up Tracy for daycare, and I, obviously, didn't come. I dropped my own kids off and didn't even answer for a while. I know it was petty, but I was stewing for 2 days and figured letting Barb stew for a few hours seemed really appropriate and felt really good. Around noon, when she called again, I did pick up. I was going to smugly tell her that I was ready for my apology and we would put it behind us, but I didn't get to. Instead, she went off on me about how I was irresponsible and I flaked, and she was so late for work because of me, To which I just said, I told you I wasn't going to pick her up. You had 2 days to make arrangements. And she kept yelling at me, so I hung up again. She kept calling and sending me texts about picking Tracy up from daycare, to which I said I will not be, then stopped replying. When I came to pick my kids up, Tracy was expecting me to take her as well, and I didn't, which was very rough on me and her both. Like, I know it's not her fault, and she's 5, and she suddenly doesn't get to go over to our place and play and have snacks. But at the same time, I didn't want to just let this thing go. I felt like I deserved an apology, and still do. So I explained that me and her mom were fighting, but I'll pick her up again when we work it out. She obviously didn't take it well because she's 5, but I apologized, took my kids, and left. Well, a bit later, I got a call from my mom. Barb roped her into picking up Tracy, but my mom is disabled, so she was having a really hard time with Tracy and asked me why I was being mean to Barb. I told her everything, expecting her to take my side, but instead, she also pulled a, you know how Nick is, to which I replied that the more I realize how Nick is, the less I like it, and if he thinks all this shoot in general and about me specifically, I sure as frick ain't gonna be doing free labor for him. She said I was blowing this all out of proportion, and I told her I wasn't the one doing it, because all I asked for was a freaking apology, and everyone else seemed to prefer all of this shoot to just giving it to me, to which she said I should just be the bigger man and not let it get to me, to which I said I was done, and to have fun with Tracy. Now for the one-day update. I wanted to thank everyone for their responses. I read through all of them, and they really helped me process my emotions. I also wanted to give an update on the situation. My sister came over today with Tracy. She apologized and said she didn't realize how much it hurt me. She said she talked to Nick, and he agreed to apologize as well. Tracy also apologized again, and I reassured her that I wasn't mad at her and that we were still cool. I told my sister that I appreciated the apology and that I would continue to pick up Tracy from daycare. Then a few commenters shared their thoughts. One said, I'm glad your sister finally understood. It's important to stand up for yourself. Another added, it's good that Tracy learned a valuable lesson about kindness and respect. I got a call from Nick himself, which I was hesitant about, but chose to answer on the off chance that I was actually about to get that apology. Nope. Apparently, my behavior is causing Barb great distress and we're family, and how can I do this to my own sister? I told him that since we're family, how can he talk shoot about me to his kid, which I take care of daily? He said he was only joking, and it was all in good fun. I told him it was neither good nor fun for me, and I want my apology. He blew up on me, telling me I was a FT and couldn't take a joke, and called me a hysterical little girl. I told him to frick off and that I was done with him and hung up. This led to a bunch of calls from Barb and my mom, which I didn't answer. Barb texted me that it wasn't fair for Tracy to pay the price for me being petty, and I told her that it wasn't fair for Tracy to pay the price of her parents being ungrateful pieces of shoot, to which she just yelled at me a bunch about how she was going to lose her job and I was being cruel to her and to mom. I told her I was done, and unless her next message was an apology, I will be blocking her number, and it wasn't. So now I blocked her. The past few days my mom's been picking up Tracy, and it's been really rough seeing her in daycare and explaining that grandma's going to pick her up, which she hates, and tells me she isn't having fun with grandma and wants to come over to our place. It's breaking my heart, but at the same time, I never got a single apology from anyone but the 5-year-old. And I feel like letting this go would just be telling my family that it's okay to ignore my boundaries. But at the same time, I do love my niece, and I don't want to traumatize her or have her resent me. She is a good kid, and none of it is her fault. So, am I the idiot? And what do I do? Now for some comments. The top comment said, Aita. Nick is always the jerk, so people are used to putting up with him. You standing up to him and making him responsible for his actions is breaking the status quo. They would rather tell you to help stabilize the boat than tell Nick to stop rocking it because it's easier to bully a nice person than it is to change a bad person. Now for the update. Alright, so I posted this yesterday and was genuinely overwhelmed by the comments, advice, and support. I'd like to thank everyone for it and feel this warrants an update. Just to clarify a few things. My dad died from a heart attack 2 years ago, which came as no surprise because he smoked a lot and lived a pretty unhealthy life, so we weren't really surprised. It wasn't his first either. He was a great grandpa and a great dad before that, and right up to the end. But his death left my mom alone, and she doesn't work. My mom has MS, which is basically mostly steady, but slowly gets worse over time and flares up occasionally, and is made worse by stress, which my mom goes through now. A flare-up often means the level she gets back to isn't quite what it was before, so we mostly try to keep her stress-free. My dad had life insurance, so her house is paid for, and she had a little money. But there's also a caretaker coming over 3 times a week to clean, cook, do shopping, etc. which she can't afford, so me and my wife pay for. As I mentioned in a comment on the original post, me and my wife are doing probably better off financially than Barb and Bill. They have a fancy house and fancy cars, but they have a mortgage and loans. So the great response I got made me think about this shoot again, and I thought how I could stand my ground without giving up on Tracy altogether, and figured there was no perfect solution, and I had to settle on something. I took the day off work because I just needed to process and deal with this shoot. One comment on the original post really got to me about how someone would feel in Tracy's place, and I just can't do it to her now. I know this isn't the update some of you have wanted, but I just can't. I love her like she was one of my own, and my kids do as well, and it's not her fault. I unblocked my sister because obviously if I'm going to be interacting with her child, she needs to be able to reach me. I talked to my mom during the day, and she was, again, distraught about having to pick Tracy up, which is pretty hard on her. I told her I was willing to do it, but I'm coming over, and she's going to have to hear me out, to which she agreed. I talked to her for a long time, avoiding snark and lashing out this time, and just explaining that basically how serious Nick was, or how he is, doesn't matter. I used that rocking the boat analogy someone linked to in comments, and further stressed my point by saying that it shouldn't matter if I was justified or not in getting upset. I am her child, and if something upset me, it at least warrants giving me the benefit of the doubt before siding against me, and eventually it seemed to come through. She apologized, and we hugged it out, and I think she got it. She's not a very confrontational person, and generally really tries to keep the peace, and this time, she went about it wrong. I'm not saying I'm not mad, but she's my mom, and she apologized. I explained to her that she shouldn't be covering for me because that means I have no leg to stand on when confronting Nick and Barb, and she was receptive to it. I texted my sister that we needed to talk, and I'll drop Tracy off at their place tonight, to which I got a stoic thumbs up. I picked Tracy up from daycare today, and she was overjoyed. She was actually a little possessive of me, staying by my side all afternoon instead of running off to play, which was cute but also made me feel like shoot a little, because that's the impact of me not picking her up. I explained to the best of my ability that she's not in trouble and I'm not angry with her, but I am angry with her parents, and we need to work that out. But I'll do my best to not stop picking her up anymore, which she was really happy about. I dropped her off in the evening, and once she was in bed, I sat down to talk with Barb and Nick. I told them flat out that Mom wasn't going to be covering for them anymore, and if they didn't let me finish what I had to say, I would get up and leave, and they could find new arrangements for Tracy. They weren't happy, but they were willing to listen, so that's progress, or at least the threat working. I explained that this was the situation now. I don't need them to mean their apology, but I sure as frick was going to need one. This was principle now. I have spent years taking care of their child, and if they wanted to be jerks, I wasn't going to do it for free. So this was how it goes now. 1. I am no longer going to be dropping her off in the morning until further notice. There was no excuse for the way Nick acted, and it needed to have some lasting impact. 2. I was no longer going to be paying for family outings and family vacations. It was a man's job to support his family, so good luck with that. The exception is Tracy, who is always welcome. 3. If I hear any more BS being talked about me behind my back, I was going to start charging them for my service. My plan was to dangle the thing they want, childcare, restoring it, but at the same time giving some repercussions and threat of things getting hard for them again. I also laid it on pretty thick about how I am a man, so I obviously have my pride and can't have that be disrespected. Even by my own family, who I obviously love, don't really consider Nick family, but figured he wouldn't figure that out. Nick was not happy about this, and my sister actually had to take him outside to talk it out without me, but eventually they did agree to it, and I got my, admittedly half-hearted, apology. I could probably press it further, but I didn't want to risk having to either back down or hurt Tracy again, so I took this. There were no tears and no warm hugs, but I get to walk away with what I wanted, giving them some payback without having to give up my time with Tracy. I still plan to talk to my sister alone about her relationship with Nick and about how she sees me, but I figure I should let things calm down a bit before I do. I know this isn't the resolution some, maybe most of you wanted, but at the end of the day, I need to find a solution I can live with. And for me, this is it. We'll update if anything changes. Am I the idiot for telling my dad his wife isn't welcome at my wedding and not caring if he skips it too? I, 24 female, have a rough relationship with my dad's 43 male wife, EF41. They got together in 2006, married in 2011, and have had 2 children since then. E has never liked me. I was introduced to her when I was 7, and things were instantly sour. She was mean, snarky, and had no interest in me whatsoever. Now, as an adult, I can tolerate her behavior, which has gotten significantly worse as I've grown up and began to talk back. The issue lies with the fact that my dad has always allowed it. I'm a grown woman and can handle myself now, as I've been doing for years, but when I was a child, he had nothing to say about her borderline insane, hurtful behavior, and will find ways to change the subject/excuse it whenever it's brought up. This has significantly damaged our relationship, and we're low contact as of now. So I'm getting married in November this year to JM25. We've been together for 11 years. E is insistent that she will be there. She will not. I have made this clear since we got engaged in November 2023. My dad is invited, but I made it plainly clear last year that she wasn't welcome as a result of her behavior, attitude, and treatment of the both of us. It's worth mentioning here that J also doesn't want E present, as she is discriminatory. J is trans, FTM, and E will deadname him, make comments about it all, and is overall hateful. He is also defensive of me given that he has been with me for the majority of E's treatment. So, my dad met with me last week and told me that if E wasn't present at my wedding, he wouldn't be either. I honestly expected something like this to happen, so I said that it was fine. He was confused and asked me to elaborate, so I explained that he didn't have to attend, but it meant that I would never speak to him again, that I had dealt with him choosing E over me for almost 20 years, and that my wedding, of his first and only daughter, being a subject of debate, was the final straw. He said nothing for a moment afterward, and then got up and left. E has been blowing up my phone with explicit texts, but it's been radio silence from my dad since our chat. As I said, I've dealt with E's treatment, and by extension, my dad's silence for almost 2 decades. My wedding feels like a good place to finally end this all, to start over. I don't see a way to fix this, or our relationship, as long as he's with E. Am I the jerk for telling my dad I don't care if he's present at my wedding? Now for a few important comments. One commenter said, NTA, there's been no effort of apology or reconciliation. It's strange that E would even want to be at the wedding anyway. Then I replied, she can't handle that. My dad will be somewhere she isn't. It's a habit of hers to take him away from my special events. Another commenter asked, what do both E and your dad have to say in regards to the reasons for you choosing not to invite E because of her hurtful treatment towards you? I responded, E is making a song and a dance of it. She knows she's vile towards me, but will deny it to people we don't know and claim we have a strained relationship. She's told me I'm attempting to divide her and my dad by saying one can attend, but the other can't, and giving my dad ultimatums to hurt him. My dad has never been able to acknowledge her treatment and will find ways to change the subject, excuse it. So he's claiming that by denying E a place at my wedding, I'm starting unnecessary drama and causing a scene. I've reiterated that I don't want her there because of see above, but he's saying that I'm only doing this to get back at him. Now for the 2-month update. Firstly, thank you all so very much. The overwhelming amount of advice, support, feedback, and kind words meant more than you could ever know. My wedding was just over a week ago, and it was absolutely perfect. It was me and Jay surrounded by the people we love and the ones who love us most. Neither my dad nor E were there. Following our last talk where I told him I didn't care if he was present, it was complete silence from him for just over a month. I took my dad's silence as his mind made up, and I actually felt at ease with it, which was another huge wake-up call. He finally messaged me in October and asked to talk over the phone. I told Jay, and he said to do it and use the opportunity to make my final choice on the matter and set it in stone. So we spoke. He asked that I allow E at the wedding. I said no. He said that he wouldn't come if she wasn't there. I said I didn't care. We went back and forth for a little bit, mostly just repeating ourselves, until he basically said, is this really the hill you want to die on? I said yes, told him that he had a week to give me a simple yes or no as to whether he would be there, and hung up. He messaged me a couple of days later with a long paragraph about how I was giving him ultimatums, making him choose, holding on to the past, petty and disrespectful, etc. And something snapped. I said that he had more than enough chances to attempt to make things right, but that I was done, and blocked him. On the day of my wedding, I tried not to think about it, and it was honestly easier than I thought, to the point I didn't realize he wasn't there until midway through the ceremony. I was hearing from mutual friends and family that my dad has been pretty silent on the whole thing. Other members of my family/close friends were present at the wedding and asked why my dad wasn't there, and I just told them it was a story for another day, not something I wanted to get into on my wedding. Honestly, this entire situation is just draining. I've known for a long time that it would end in flames at some point or another, and I'm not entirely sure why I held out that little bit of hope for so long. I genuinely feel at peace for the first time in years, and relieved that I no longer have to deal with him or E. I'm in bed with my now husband writing this post and feeling better than ever. I've realized I gave him too much of my time and patience when he didn't deserve it. This toxic chapter of my life is done. I'm more in love with my childhood sweetheart than I thought was possible, and can't stop grinning at the fact I get to call him my husband. Again, thank you so very much for all of the responses. You're all a lot wiser than I am. Have a great day, everyone. Now for a top comment. Good for you. I'm glad you're moving forward with your life with your supportive husband. You know you're better off without your dad or E. Congrats on your marriage and happy life.